شد وفاقي يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جدي ودقة عظمي يا من بدا خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتربيتي أخذني ابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي يا إلهي وسيدي وربي أتراك معبد بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من توى عليه قلبي من معرفتك وليج به للسعي من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك وبعد سفك أترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك هيهات أنت أقرب من أن تضيع من ربيت أو تبعد من أضليت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من رحمته ورحمته وليت شأني يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي وتسلط النار على وجوه الفرة لعظمتك ساجدا وعلى أرضك بتوحيدك صادقا ولشكرك مادحا وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا وعلى ضمائر أخذت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة وأشارت استغفارك موعدا ما حاك ذنب النوبك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مقته يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته فكيف احتمال لبلاء الآخرة وجميل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي لي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها ضج وأبكي بيمين العذاب وشدتي أم طول البلاء ومدتي ولئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك وهبني يا إلهي صبرت على حرمانك وكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء عفوك وبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا أن تركتني ناطقا لا ضجن إليك بين أهلها مجيد الآمنين ولا صرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولا أبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولو نادينك إن كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية آمال العارفين يا هياك المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصالحين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم تجنى فيها بمخالفته وذاقك عن عذابها بمعصيته وحبس بين طباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان يحل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك أم كيف تعلمه النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يحركه لحيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه ذخيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه أم كيف يتقلقل بين طباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب أم كيف يرجو فضلك في يديه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبح لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين يقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب شاهدك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك ولجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان في أحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حكمتها وغلبك من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمت وكل ذنب أذنبت وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم جهود علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم برحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أرسلت وإحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك ربي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بضر ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعدم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا حتى تكون أعمالي وأولادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت وحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قول على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العظيم في جوانحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المبادرين واشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وادنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأعرض ومن كادني فكر واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك واعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وقلني عسرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة وإليك يا رب نصبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي وبعزتك استجب لدعائي وبلغني منايا ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دعاء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى إرحام رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابع النعم يا دافع النقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت أحلو وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد
سورة الله.
محمد وعلى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
يا فاطمة زهرا يا فاطمة زهرا فریاد ہے یا أم مدد کرے علی کے حق کا واسطہ حبیب مستقبر دیکھ کر ہمارا دل تڑپ رہا ہے بی بی فاطمہ مدد کرے علی کے حق کا واسطہ ہے بی بی فاطمہ ٹوٹے ہوئے دلوں کا بس اتنا سہرا ہے آپ یا فاطمہ جس کو علی پکارے وہی فاطمہ ہے آپ یا فاطمہ مشکل کشا کے واسطے مشکل کشا ہے آپ یا فاطمہ ذیشان اور رضا کے لبوں کی صدا ہے آپ یا فاطمہ دل ہے اداس ہم ہے پریشان فاطمہ مشکل ہماری کیجیے آسان آسان فاطمہ یا فاطمہ زہرا یا فاطمہ زہرا فریاد ہے یا ام ابینا فریاد ہے یا ام ابیہا
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
MashaAllah.
Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Tonight, Surah Yasin will be recited for all Manhumins, and let's read Surah Fatiha for all the Manhumins sponsored for tonight's majlis. Al-Fatiha.
Bismillah.
Tomorrow, as usual, Namaz-e-Jum'ah at 11:15 with Sheikh Bilal. On Saturday, we shall observe the wafat of Hazrat Baneen alayhi salam, and the program will start at 4:45 p.m. with Salat, Surah Yasin, Marshia, Majlis, Matam by Sheikh Fayyaz, and then end with Ziyarat. There will be also Chalisma Majlis, 40th Majlis of Marhuma Amina by Dala. Kindly, please, we request you all to come on time. There's a request for Brother Akbar Rizvi in Allentown, who is sick, and we request you all to read 5 times Amma Yujibud for his recovery and all those who are sick. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Amma Yujibul Mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. 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 Muhammad wa Muhammad salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala
The big Nara salawat, Sheikh Bilal, please. Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad.
Rahimullah man yaqra Surah Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. من المؤمنين رجال صدقوا ما أحدوا الله عليه فمنهم من قضى نهبه ومنهم من ينتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
second salawat for love of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
loudest salawat for ta'jeel faraj sa'ad al-asr wal-zaman.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Before we begin our discussion tonight, some of the points of fiqh that we talk about, there's a question that is starting to become more and more common as people explore over the internet, and it seems worthwhile to address the question before it becomes prevalent in our own community. A trend has started where people in their salat want to include Shahada al-Thalitha. Shahada al-Thalitha refers to saying that in our tashahhud, after we say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, that someone adds the third shahada saying Ashhadu anna Aliyyun waliyullah. And there's debates and discussions about this concept. However, when we look at this idea from a fiqhi perspective, it very easily becomes resolved. And let me explain why. In salah, other than the wajib statements that are required for salah to be complete, we have permission to add 3 types of statements to our salah. One is the dhikr of Allah, that we can increase the dhikr, we can add dhikr of Allah, and we can have dhikr of Allah in our salah. The second is the recitation of Quran. You can recite Quran in your salah, you can add Quran in your salah, you can increase the recitation of Quran as a part of your salah. The third element that we're allowed to do is dua, which is why making dua in salah is permissible and it is allowed, and it's something that we're allowed to do. When we look at the addition of Shahada al-Thalitha, we see that it's not one of these 3 items. Neither is it dhikr, nor is it Quran, nor is it dua. It is a statement that we are making. As such, this statement or any statement that is added to the arkan or added to the salat makes the salat batil. It is not permissible to say something outside of anything that fits in these criteria in our prayer. Some people, for example, say that, well, the same way the adhan is something in which that we've added this to, then why is it a problem that we can add it to adhan but we can't add it to our salah? First off, adhan and iqamah are something mustahab, and it is permissible to speak in the middle of the adhan and iqamah. If I'm giving adhan and iqamah, and I stop in the middle of that adhan, so for example, hey, don't do that. Or for example, some other activity that I want to do or that I need to do, or you can turn on the lights here, and I stop my iqamah and my adhan, I can continue those actions because they're mustahab. They're not wajib actions that have restrictions on what it is that we need to perform. In comparison to that, salat is something that is wajib, it has hudud and limitations, and we know for a fact that speaking in salah outside of what Allah has commanded us to recite, speech is not permissible, and this statement falls in that category. Now there may be people that, for example, come up with other logic and reasoning and other reasons for why they include it, and this isn't an argument with them. This is simply looking at the construction of the fiqh of salah, looking at the laws that Allah has prescribed for us of salah, and realizing that when we place the criteria, there is no place where this addition counts or is permissible, and therefore it is not something that we do in our prayers. So it may happen, you may hear others about it, the interest of educating you is not on the basis that giving you ammunition for argument. We've never said that anything that we discuss is to go disprove someone else. It's to ensure that our own actions are valid and they follow the laws in the ahkam of salah. So the 3 things that are permissible, right? We said dhikr of Allah, dua, and Quran. If something doesn't fit into these categories, it is not something that belongs within salat. That does not in any way mean that it is not worth knowing or worth saying, but that Allah has prescribed the system of His salat and we follow that system. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Tonight, one of the discussions that's mentioned is this discussion around the brother of Amir al-Mu'mineen, ibn Abi Talib, and one of the dates that's associated with his martyrdom. In the authenticity of the date and the significance of the date, there is some differences that you'll find in opinion, but to use it as an opportunity to speak about someone who was beloved to the Prophet and had significance in the religion of Islam is a worthwhile opportunity. Which is why the verse that we began our discussion with, from Surah Al-Ahzab, verse number 23, the various Mufassirin have different opinions about this verse. In this verse we read, and we say, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ رِجَالٌ صَدَقُوا مَا أَحَدَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَضَى نَحْبَهُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَنْتَظِرُ وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. This verse, and it says, it's among the believers are men who are true to their covenant with Allah. Some of them have fulfilled their vow and oath, and some are still awaiting it, and they have not changed, and there's no difference between them, whether they went earlier or later. Famously, in tafsir of Shaykh al-Qummi, Shaykh Qummi's tafsir Qummi, which is a very famous tafsir, one of the oldest tafsir, if not the oldest tafsir that we possess, he mentions, as well as many other mufassirin, and books like Basair al-Darajat and Bisharat al-Mustafa li-Shi'at al-Muqtada, mention tradition in which it says that there are two narrations. One that says that Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam would explain and say that this verse is about him, and he said that in the advent of Islam, me, my uncle Hamza, my brother Ja'far, and my cousin Ubaidah, we gathered together and we made an oath amongst the four of us that whatever would happen, we would always defend this Prophet of Allah and we would sacrifice our lives for his sake. And that all of them have gone, and they are the ones who fulfill their vow and their oath that they sacrifice their lives for the sake of Islam, and I remain and I am continuing on this path until I too will make a sacrifice. The other hadith that's mentioned in some of the other books describes and says that Rasulullah, upon hearing the death of his cousin Ja'far, made dua to Allah. He said, "Oh Allah, I had 4 generals, I had 4 deputies on this earth. Ubaidah, Hamza, Ja'far, and Ali. 3 of them have left me. Oh Allah, do not leave me alone without any of my supporters." And in reply to this dua is what Allah reveals this verse, مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ رِجَالٌ صَدَقُوا مَا عَاهَدُوا اللَّهَ عَلَيْهِ فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَضَى نَحْبَهُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَنْتَظِرُ وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. That this verse was revealed as a comfort to the Prophet, that yes, some went before and others came after. These 4 individuals have a unique status in the religion of Islam for their commitment, their Shahada, and the love that the Prophet had for them, and that the status and sacrifices that they made for the religion of Islam. Briefly, one personality from amongst them we spend much time talking about, the other 3 we don't talk much about. So briefly, a little bit about each of these personalities. Ubaidah ibn Harith ibn Abdul Muttalib was the cousin of the Holy Prophet, and he was one of the earlier adopters of the religion of Islam. Ubaidah ibn Harith being the cousin, Harith being the brother of Abdullah, the father of Rasulullah. Ubaidah was the cousin of Rasulullah. In the history of Islam, he is one of the first who adopted the religion of Islam, and he is actually one of the first who went out on a campaign before the Battle of Badr, famously. When the merchants from Mecca were collecting and bringing wealth from their sales to purchase arms and weapons against the Holy Prophet, Rasulullah sent a skirmish out to go and to stop these people from taking that wealth to come and attack the Muslimin. And the one who led that was this Ubaidah ibn Harith. And Ubaidah ibn Harith is credited as being one of the first who was given the flag of Islam to go out and represent the Islam in the battlefield. It's narrated that in the first battle of Islam, in the Battle of Badr, important to know, the first battle of Islam, if anybody ever asks you, was the Battle of Badr. The second, anyone know? Ahad, thank you. And the third? Khandaq or Ahzab. These are the first 3 major battles of Islam. Badr, Uhud, and then Khandaq. In the Battle of Badr, this Ubaidah was martyred in one-on-one combat, and he was one of the original Shahada, and he's one of the Shahada of the Battle of Badr, and he is noted amongst the Shahada, and they have a great status, an Azim status. 14 people who were killed in the Battle of Badr. So this was the first of the generals and the supporters of Rasulullah who were sincere and true in his support. He was the cousin of the Holy Prophet, and he was martyred in the Battle of Badr. The second that we talk about is Hazrat Hamza. Hazrat Hamza was one of the sons of Abdul Muttalib, and technically the uncle of the Holy Prophet, though in many narrations he was maybe only 2 years older than the Holy Prophet, but he was about the same age. He was someone who was known for his ferocity as a warrior, and was known as someone who was one of the honorable people and one of the leaders of the tribes and of the nations of the Quraysh. Famously, what's said is that one time when he was out hunting after the annunciation of the Prophet's message, He had not declared one way or another. No one knew what his status was. But when he came back from his hunt, he heard a news that Abu Jahl had attacked and abused the Holy Prophet in an extreme fashion. And upon hearing this, Hazrat Hamza comes into the precincts of the Kaaba, where all of the dignitaries of the Quraysh are sitting, and he immediately attacks Abu Jahl and makes him bleed from his forehead. And he says, how dare you attack the Prophet when I, Hamza, am alive and I believe in his message? If you have any bravery in you, if you have the bravery to attack him, then why don't you come for me first? It's noted and said that Hazrat Hamza's open approach like this in front of all the leaders of the Quraysh, that after this incident, they stopped threatening and abusing the Prophet in the extremity that they would abuse him before this. Many of the times when we see that the negotiations with the Prophet that the Quraysh held, where they tried to get the Prophet that, okay, listen, we'll negotiate with you, don't be the Prophet, be one of ours, or accept our gods and we'll accept yours. All of these negotiations took place after Hazrat Hamza stood up to Abu Jahl and forbade them and threatened them that you attacking the Prophet would not end well for them and that they would have to answer to Hazrat Hamza. That status of Hazrat Hamza was one of the things that protected the Prophet in the city of Mecca and allowed him to preach freely. Now famously, after they came to the city of Medina, Hazrat Hamza was made brother with a personality by the name of ibn Abi Talib, who was one of the significant personalities in the history of Islam. And he was someone who sacrificed and fought greatly for the sake of Islam until the Battle of Uhud, where it is very famous that Wahshi is the one who threw a javelin or a spear at him and killed him, and he was martyred and his body was desecrated. Amongst the history of the Shahada of Islam, he is the first one to be known as Sayyid al-Shuhada, Master of the Martyrs, which is a title which is very famously associated with our third Imam, Imam Hussein ibn Ali, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Abu Abdullah, Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
But very famously, the first one to be given this title was Hazrat Hamza. And his status was such that Sayyidah Zahra would go to visit his grave twice a week, on Tuesdays and then Fridays, that she would go and visit his grave. And that the tradition of visiting the grave is something that took place in the life of the Holy Prophet as well too. And his own daughter did it, and it was a well-established practice. This nonsense that you hear sometimes people say that, oh, the idea of visiting the graves is bid'ah, is this, is that. No, the Prophet's own daughter used to do it in her life, not once, not irregularly, but on a regular, consistent basis. It was one of the habits that she possessed. The first one to make a tasbih of Khaq al-Shifa was Sayyidah Zahra, making a tasbih of Khaq al-Shifa from the Khaq of the grave of Hazrat Hamza. So his status and his desecration of his body after his death was one of the Adhim difficulties that are Prophet went through. Famously, the first Majlis-e-Azhar that's held is held for Hazrat Hamza. After the Battle of Uhud, where a number of the Mu'mineen and Muslimin were killed, every house had a majlis in it, and then they said, we saw Rasulullah weeping. And he said, why are you crying? He says, you make majlis for all of your family members, but no one remembers my uncle who was killed in the Battle of Uhud. So famously, all of the women had gathered and the men gathered, and then they held elegies and recited elegies in honor of Hazrat Hamza. And one of the first majalis of inviting people to cry was held by our Prophet for Hazrat Hamza. So his status was great as well too. The third of these personalities, and we'll spend a little bit of time on this one, is Hazrat Ja'far, who we're discussing today. Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar, Ja'far Dhul Janahayn, is the older brother of Imam Ali by 10 years. So it's narrated that Hazrat Abu Talib had 4 sons. Aqil, there is Aqil, Talib, Aqil, Ja'far, and Ali. Each of these 4 sons had 10 years of age between them. And Talib being the eldest, then Aqil, then Ja'far, and then Imam Ali. Ja'far was 20 at the age of the enunciation of the message of Islam. Famously, it's said that Ja'far looked so much like Rasulullah, that he had such a similarity in his appearance to Rasulullah, that people would often mistake Ja'far for the Prophet of Allah and say, Anta Rasulullah. And he would say, no, I am Ja'far, I am not the Prophet of Allah. Meaning he used to look so much like the Prophet. His akhlaq, his character, his piety was something that was very famous in his behavior and mannerism. Amongst our narrations, he is the second man to have accepted the religion of Islam. The narrations famously note that Abu Talib, upon seeing Rasulullah standing in the precincts of the Kaaba with Imam Ali on his right praying with him and Sayyidah Khadija praying behind him, sends Ja'far and says, Ja'far, go stand to the left of your cousin and pray with him. And here Hazrat Ja'far announced publicly his renunciation of Islam. Other sources from amongst other schools of thought narrate and say that he was amongst the first 20 or 30 or some number that they have devised and said that he's amongst the earliest but not the second. But this narration tells us that he was the second to publicly announce his following of the message of Rasulullah, and he was someone who in his life, like his brother Imam Ali, was someone who did not bow and prostrate in front of idols. Ja'far holds very unique special characteristics in the sense that during the period of Makkah, when the Prophet found that the Muslimin were being persecuted, he sent them to Abyssinia to seek sanctuary. The one who was sent as the leader of the Muslims to Abyssinia was this Ja'far. One of the attributes that Hazrat Ja'far possessed, which was unique amongst many of the other companions and was something that he was especially known for, was his eloquence in speech and the beauty of his ability to present his concept, well-structured thoughts, and in a way that people would listen. Maybe this was one of the reasons, along with his piety and character, that when Rasulullah sent him to Abyssinia, that he stands in front of the king Negus and he preaches the message of Islam, and Negus allows the Muslims to live safely in the land of Abyssinia. Famously, Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar stayed with the Muslimin, which was about 82 men and a number of women and children, in the land of Abyssinia for about 15 years, until approximately the year 5 or 6 after Hijrah, where he makes his second Hijrah and returns back to the land of Medina this time. When he returns back to the land of Medina, Islam is finishing its fourth conquest, which is the conquest of the valley or the fort of Khaybar. Khaybar is one of the very significant events in the history of Islam because prior to Khaybar, Muslimin were poor. Khaybar was that conquest that gave Muslimin wealth and gave them the ability to spread out and gave them the ability to be a major power in Arabia and establish the religion of Islam. That conquest that brought wealth to Islam for the first time, when our Prophet is returning from the conquest of Khaybar, Ja'far meets him on the way. And when Rasulullah sees Ja'far, famously, he proceeds towards him, hugs him, and kisses him between his eyes and makes a statement which shows the status of Hazrat Ja'far. He says, I do not know which makes me more happy, the return of Ja'far or the conquest of Khaybar. Remember, Khaybar is that battle that was required for Islam to flourish. Without that conquest, Islam might not have flourished. The wealth wasn't there for it to do. But the Prophet equivocates that battle to the return of Ja'far. Ja'far's return is something that makes the Holy Prophet very happy. He says, Ya Ja'far, shall I give you something special and unique? Now again, conquest of Khaybar, great wealth has been earned. The assumption that people had is that the Prophet in this instance will give Ja'far some great wealth or some special jewels or something that was earned from this conquest that would show a dignity and status amongst the people in Islam. As Ja'far of course says, Ya Rasulullah, please give me. And Rasulullah teaches him a salat that's called Salat Ja'far al-Tayyar. The beauty of this statement is look and see what is the true designation and pleasure of a mu'min in this world. Society at large thought the Prophet came into great wealth, his cousin came back. Prophet dignifies his cousin by giving him great wealth. Prophet doesn't do that. Prophet doesn't show the status of Ja'far in materialism. He shows his status in supplication and in relationship with Allah. Which is why many times don't look at the material that a person possesses, look at their piety in relationship to Allah and what their uniqueness in their ibadah is, that Rasulullah gives Ja'far a unique type of ibadah. Till today, the salat of Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar, if there is something that you want, something that you need, something that you're going through in difficulty, one of the strongest proven wasila that we have is ask Allah by the wasila of Salat Ja'far al-Tayyar. Pray this 2 rakat salat, or 4 rakat salat, and upon completion of this, you'll find, you ask for your need and you find that Allah fulfills your need quickly. There's a technique to this prayer. This is a mustahab prayer, and you can look this up and find it, but again, briefly to describe it and share it here. This 4 rakat prayer is prayed in 2 rakat prayers. In the first 2 rakat prayer, you recite after Surah Fatiha, Surah Al-Zilzal, and in the second rakat after Surah Fatiha, you recite Surah Al-Adiyat. In the second salat, you recite Surah Idha Ja'a Nasr, and in the 4th rakat, or the final rakat, you recite Surah Al-Ikhlas, Tawheed, Qul Huwallah. These 4 are the surahs that you recite. Along with the recitation of these 4 surahs, in these 4 rakats, what's unique about this salah is you recite the tasbihat al-arba'a, Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, No, come on, man, you're saying, hey, come on, man. Wallahu, thank you very much. Oh boy, I was worried for a second. This Tasbih al-Arba is recited in these 4 rakats 300 times. And there's a technique to this. When you start the salat, and in the first rakat, after reciting Surah Al-Hamd and Surah Al-Ziyarat, you recite 15 times, Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar. Then you go into ruku, and in the ruku, after you do the dhikr, or even before you do the dhikr, you recite 10 times, Subhanallah walhamdulillah. When you stand up from ruku, you recite it again another 10 times. When you go into sajda, in sajda you recite again 10 times. When you sit up from sajda, again you recite 10 times. And when you go back into sajda, again you recite 10 times. Such that in every rakat, you recite Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar 75 times. 15 in qiyam, 10, 10, 10, julus 10, sajda 10, and that's equal to 75 times in every single rak'ah. This salat is considered so powerful that if anyone has a need that needs to be fulfilled, if there's a desire that you have to ask, you ask by this wasila and your desires and your needs are fulfilled. And this was something unique that Rasulullah gave to Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar. Until today, every Imam has emphasized that if you have a need, turn back to this wasila, your needs will be met. So when we talk about the superiority of Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar, we don't measure his superiority in, for example, the ma'rifat and the battles that he fought. Rather, we measure his superiority in the attribute that Allah has uniquely given him, that it is a doorway through which our needs and our desires can be met. That whether it's for marriage, whether it's for having children, for jobs and employment, for any difficulty a person faces, one of the most powerful tools that we possess is the Salat of Ja'far al-Tayyar. Beyond this, we see that he was one of the legatees and appointees who led the armies of the Holy Prophet, including that which led him into the areas of what is today Jordan, where there was an incursion from the Roman armies into the Muslim lands. And the expectation was that there was a Roman village there, and that the Muslims would simply go and fortify the barrier to demonstrate that this is a place of safety for the Muslimin and no one should enter. However, when they reached the barrier of the Muslim lands, they found that a Roman, not just a Roman town was there, but an entire legion, which was over 1,000 soldiers were there. A few of the close companions, Zayd ibn Haritha, Ja'far al-Tayyar, and a few of the companions that were there that had been given authority, now had a decision to make, that they had a deputization of maybe 300 soldiers or 200 soldiers, and in front of them was a legion of 1,000 soldiers. And the debate began in this situation that they said, Rasulullah sent us to simply fortify this location, there's an entire army in front of us. And the debate began of what should we do in this situation. And some of the people simply said that we just have to keep the border here, let's not attack them, let's go back and report back. We weren't told to fight a war, we weren't told to do this, we weren't told to do that. And in the middle of this, Ja'far and Zayd ibn Haritha, they have a conversation where they simply say, what's the question? We were sent to defend the land of Islam. There are 1,000 men in front of us attacking the land of Islam. What better opportunity will we have to attain Shahada than to fulfill the command of the Holy Prophet? And as we fulfill the command of the Holy Prophet, if we become Shaheed, what's better than that? And the small group of 200 or 300 men make the decision to fight against this legion of men that is against them. And in this is the process where Shahada takes place. And the Shahadat of Zayd ibn Haritha takes place, and the Shahadat of Ja'far al-Tayyar. The Shahadat of Ja'far al-Tayyar is considered very famous in the instance that they describe his bravery, and his bravery is well noted, that some have said, and this is what one of the famous retellings in the book of Maqatil is that Ja'far, upon seeing the press of the enemy upon them, dismounted from his horse and then cut the legs from his horse so that the enemy could not take his horse from him. This is something that's debated and discussed in books of whether it's something that they kind of said, like the burning of the boats that they described of the Romans, or that this was actually done or not. But Ja'far stands and he fights, and being the flag bearer, the army stays together as long as the flag is raised. So what does Ja'far do? He fights and fights and fights until again they cut one arm to make the flag fall, cut the other arm to make the flag fall. It still doesn't fall until they actually kill Hazrat Ja'far. Yeah. This particular battle that takes place has a very interesting history of how it ends and who is it that ends it. And some people are very proud of the strategies that are here, but the significance of the conversation is that the Shahada of the cousin of the Holy Prophet, the third of his deputies, is martyred in this battle. Famously, our Prophet goes to pay condolences to the wife of Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar. And when he goes, he sees Abdullah ibn Ja'far, the son of Hazrat Ja'far, sitting there playing. And he asks Abdullah ibn Ja'far, what are you doing? Abdullah says, I am playing shop, I am selling my wares, I am making things and I am selling them. Rasulullah puts his hand on the head of this child and says, may Allah make you always prosperous in everything you buy and sell. Which is one of the consequences that said this Abdullah ibn Ja'far became one of the wealthiest men in Medina and became one of the most richest people in all of Medina, and it was because of the barakat of the dua of the Holy Prophet that was made upon him. Abdullah ibn Ja'far famously is the husband of Bibi Zainab. He's also one of the third amongst, whenever you hear narrations of the youth of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, you hear the mention of Abdullah ibn Ja'far in many of these riwayat. That he was always in the company of the Ahlul Bayt and in the company of the Imam. And that he was one of those who continued the prosperity of his father by being attached to the message of the Ahlul Bayt. Abdullah ibn Ja'far himself says, whenever I would want to ask Imam Ali, my uncle, for anything, if I was ever worried that my uncle wouldn't give it to me, I would ask by the wasila of my father Ja'far. And whenever I would say, oh Uncle Ali, I ask you by the rights of my father, Imam Ali never denied anything that I asked. And he says this was a demonstration of how much my uncle loved my father Hazrat Ja'far, and the azamat of the status of Hazrat Ja'far as a wasila. That's even, for example, his son takes the wasila with the Imam of the time to be able to meet his needs. Hence, the discussion around Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar, his family, his lineage, that his lineage was one that was present with the Ahlul Bayt, married with the Ahlul Bayt, and went to Karbala with the Ahlul Bayt, and was part of the Shahada and the difficulties and the goodness of Ahlul Bayt. It's one of the honors and dignities that Hazrat Ja'far was granted in his life and after his life. And still till today in the lands of Jordan, you can go and you can visit his grave, and it is a Ziyarat that's present there. And there's a Gari that you can visit there with Zayd ibn Haritha, Hazrat Ja'far and the other Shahada of that battle are present as well too. But this verse that we began our discussion with, very famously after his Shahada, it's when Rasulullah is saddened that three of his four supporters, three of those who had promised loyalty and were sincere with him, had left. That he prays to Allah and Allah answers him, and he says that these are those men who are truthful in their vows that they make to Allah, and some have gone before and completed and some are remaining. And that at this, the Prophet is given satisfaction that the one who remains with him, Ali ibn Abi Talib, will stay, and that his status will be as great and greater than these other companions and deputies that the Holy Prophet presented. The point that we finish on is that when you see the statement, this is the same verse that we see about Abdullah in the field of Karbala, that whenever his friends would come and bid farewell to him, whenever his friends would come to bid farewell, the Imam would say, you are going first and we are coming after you. And famously he would say, مِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَضَى نَحْبَهُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَنْتَظِرُ وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. Saying that there are those who have fulfilled their vow and have proceeded in the direction of martyrdom, and those who still remain, and that they are waiting for this opportunity for martyrdom. And on the day of Ashura, Abdullah repeated this 70 times, as each of his companions went into the battlefield, as each of his friends left. And then you saw him when he was the one who was alone in the battlefield. He called out, "O my lions, O my friends, where are you now when Hussein calls upon you? You have fulfilled your vows and you have taken your breaks, but now Hussein stands alone in this battlefield. There is no one to support Hussein ibn Ali in this location." It was Abu Abdullah who was the last one that would fulfill that vow on that day and go through that difficulty. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un wa dhanbika ba'du tasliman bi amrih. Nad'uka bismika al-azim al-a'zam al-a'azz al-ajall al-akram. We call out 10 times. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Mahmud bihaqqi Muhammad. يا أعلى بحق علي يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة يا محسن بحق الحسن يا قديم الأحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, by the right of these Ahlul Bayt, by the right of the Quran, by the right of these righteous personalities, oh Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Ya Allah, we have gathered here with hajat, by the right of this night, by the right of those mentioned, by the right of the Quran, fulfill our hajat. Oh Allah, there are those amongst us, our families, the mu'mineen, who are suffering through sickness and disease and difficulty. Ya Allah, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, those of the mu'mineen who are suffering through strife and insecurity, wherever they may be in this world, oh Allah, give aman to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Ya Allah, hasten the appearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. Entitle us the Ziyarat of Imam Hussein in this world and the Shafa'ah of Imam Hussein in the hereafter. One Surah Fatiha, 3 times Surah Ikhlas, لأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات مع الصلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله.
آل مصطفیٰ پہ ظلم جفا و محمدا و مصیبتا و محمدا و مصیبتا آل مصطفیٰ پہ ظلم جفا گرتا گرتا خیمہ کش گلا آل مصطفیٰ پہ ظلم جفا و محمدا و محمدا و مصیبتا آل مصطفیٰ پہ ظلم جفا قبر تک نہیں ایک جا ہوئی کوئی ہے نہ جا شام میں کوئی قبر تک نہیں ایک جا ہوئی کوئی ہے نہ جا شام میں کوئی کاظ میں یوں جدا جدا آل مصطفیٰ پہ ظلم یہ جفا و محمدا و محمدا و مصیبتا آل مصطفیٰ پہ ظلم یہ جفا جو کہ ہے امیر مومنین کا اس پہ ہو یہ ظلم و مصیبتا جو کہ ہو امیر مومنین کا اس پہ ہو یہ ظلم و مصیبتا سر دو ٹکڑے ہو ذکر خدا آل مصطفیٰ پہ ظلم یہ جفا و محمدا و محمدا و مصیبتا آل مصطفیٰ پہ ظلم یہ جفا زلزلے میں ہو کیوں نہ نئی نوا کیوں نہ پھر ہلے دشت کربلا زلزلے میں ہو کیوں نہ نئی نوا کیوں نہ پھر ہلے دشت کربلا ہائے فوج کی چھین لے ردا آل مصطفیٰ پہ ظلم یہ جفا و محمدا و مصیبتا و محمدا و مصیبتا آل مصطفیٰ پہ ظلم یہ جفا دم گھٹا ہوا دل ردا ہوا گر لٹا ہوا سر کھلا ہوا دم چھٹا ہوا دل ردا ہوا گر لٹا ہوا سر کھلا ہوا چہرے پہ ملے خاک کربلا آل مصطفیٰ پہ ظلم یہ جفا و محمدا و مصیبتا و محمدا و مصیبتا آل مصطفیٰ پہ ظلم یہ جفا
اللهم صل على
السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن الكلام. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا رسول الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث علي أمير المؤمنين ولي عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن حبيبة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا سارة والنصار والبكر الموجود. أشهد أنك ركنت الصلاة وأعطيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأعطاك الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. ولعن اللهم من كتبك ولعن اللهم من زهمك ولعن اللهم من انتظارك فرزقي يا مولاي يا عبد الله. أشهد أنك كنت من في الأصنام شامها والأرحام منتحرة لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تملك بسنتها وكبيرا لم تلبس كلمات سيادها. وأشهد أنك من داعي الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر الكثير الربيع الزكي الحادي المحبوب. وأشهد أنك من ذل كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والألفة الوسطى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياء ورسلا أني بكم مؤمن وبيامكم موقن بشرائعي وخواتيم عملي وقلبي بقلبكم سيد وأمري بأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى خالدكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام عليكم يا رسول الله. السلام عليكم نبي الله. السلام عليكم يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا حسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن اللهم من قتلك ولعن اللهم من زهمك ولعن اللهم من سميك بذلك فرزقك. السلام عليك يا أولياء الله والرجاء. السلام عليك يا أصفياء الله والرجاء. السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن علي وزكي الناصر. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله. بأبي أنت وأمي طبتم وطارت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم وأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل والعباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوسيم. السلام عليك يا ابن أول كامل الإسلام وأختم الإيمان وأختم من دين الله وأختم إلى الإسلام. أشهد أنك نصحت لله والرسول ولأخيك حميم له المعاصي. ولعن اللهم من قتلك ولعن اللهم من ظلمك ولعن اللهم من استحلت منك المحارم وانتهك الحكومة الإسلام. ونعم الصابر المجاهد المقام الناصر والأحباء في الأمكن يجيب الله أجر الواحد فيما زهد فيه خير من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل. واتفق الله الذي بآبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا خليل القرآن والسلطان الحسن علي بن موسى الرزاق وشفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء. وختم الله زيارتك يا مولا وزاد الله شفاعتك في الدنيا والآخرة. السلام عليكم ورحمة فاطمة المعصومة ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم الإمام سليمان السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته مع الصلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد.
اللهم كل وليك حجة الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آله في هذه الساعة في كل ساعة وليا وفاتنا وعلى الناس وناشرا وليا معينا حتى تشفيه أنت ترضى وتوفيه فيها وليا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم صل على محمد.